Welcome to the Political Matrix News. We have the sources, we have the truth from inside the political matrix.
And welcome back to the Political Matrix News podcast tonight on the 22nd of January, and just 2 days after freedom. Got started again with the new golden age of America. In the Gulf of America and all the snow that we are enjoying here in South Florida, everything else, it's beautiful, isn't it?
Well, I don't believe that Gulf of America is beautiful. I got to tell you, I think that's petty, and I don't like it.
Well,
and I will continue to call it Gulf of Mexico.
Already changed it.
I know he has, but I don't like it. It's petty, and it should have been Gulf of Mexico, and it should remain that way. Because that's what it has been for, what, 200 years? It hadn't always been. It used to be called Gulf of Spain, Gulf of New Spain. I mean, there used to be a lot of other names for it long before Gulf of Mexico. But it's been Gulf of Mexico for at least 200 years, and it's ridiculous that we're changing it. I think it's terrible.
It is terrible. But real quick, we're going to go ahead and talk about what's happening with all the pardons of the January 6th guys.
Well, the pardons for the January 6th rioters, and that's what they were. They were rioters. They were not insurrectionists. They were rioters, although not all of them were rioting. Some of them were simply present. I was very pleased that they were pardoned. It was a surprise they were pardoned on day one, even though he had signaled it would be day one. I really didn't think it would be. I was kind of expecting it to be about 10 days later, and was predicting on or about February 1st. But it was a good thing that it happened. And two of the rioters have said they want to reject the pardon, but the reality is they don't have the right to do that. I mean, the Supreme Court's quite clear that you get what you get. Now, there was a Supreme Court case in 1915 that said that you had to kind of accept the pardon, but there was another one in 1921 that said you kind of don't accept it. That case had to do with commutations, not pardons, so they're technically different. But I would argue that the arguments were exactly the same, and that the 1927 case would be precedent over the 1915 case that says you don't have to accept it, you get what you get. And the basic argument made by the Supreme Court, a unanimous Supreme Court decision, by the way, although it was a 8-0 unanimous decision, even though there were 9 members on the court. Quick trivia, why was that?
I don't know.
Because former President Taft was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and he is the guy who issued the pardon, or rather issued the commutation, excuse me. So he abstained. So that's why. But the case was basically, there was this guy who was convicted of murder in Alaska. Alaska was a territory at the time. It didn't become a state until 1959. And so it was a federal crime. He was convicted of murder. He was sentenced to death by hanging. President Taft commuted that to life in prison. He was transferred to a prison in Washington State and then to Leavenworth. And he argued against the commutation. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court, which decided in 1927 that the convict has no say in the matter, that he has no more say in a commutation than he has in the original sentence. He gets what he gets, whether he likes it or not. And again, that was specific to commutations, not pardons. But I would argue the argument's the exact same thing. And so I don't think that a January 6th convict, even if he wanted to, could get away with rejecting pardon.
Now, which January 6th convicts are you talking about? Because, I mean, right now we have a lot of non-convicts here who are also been pardoned for the January 6th.
Well, you talk about people that are still not tried yet?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, isn't that amazing? That 4 years later, a little over 4 years later, we still have people that are without trial. And in some cases, they're incarcerated without trial all these years later.
They still have not been tried yet. They still have not had a speedy trial. Like, is their constitutional right? Now you have all these other pardons of people who might be on trial theoretically one day, but now that Biden have pardoned his side of the aisle and Trump pardoned his side of the aisle, is there anything to even look at anymore?
Well, there actually is. And I think this has to do with the Biden pardons, and this would be with the Fauci pardon. It would be with the Milley pardon. do with his family pardons. What really should happen now is that even though there can be no criminal prosecutions of these people because they're pardoned, Congress can and should hold hearings on what happened.
Exactly.
What happened with the COVID response? Subpoena Dr. Fauci, get him under oath testifying in Congress.
Right.
And there's basically three things that he could do. He could refuse to show up. Now it's contempt of Congress, a crime. Or he can show up and do one of two things. Lie under oath, perjury, prosecute him for that, or he can tell the truth. And the reality is, Greg, if he told the truth, I'd be just as happy with that. He didn't have to go to jail. I mean, I'd love to see him in jail, don't misunderstand. But if he would just tell the truth, I'd be satisfied with that. That's okay. Similarly, that should be done with the J6 committee and their staff. And let's not forget, the staff was also pardoned.
Exactly.
And the reason that the staff was also pardoned is because we know that it wasn't the representatives that destroyed the evidence. The representatives simply ordered the staff to destroy the evidence.
Destroy the evidence, exactly.
So we should call them in front of a congressional committee. We should do the same thing with them, get them on the record. And if they tell the truth, well, would I like to see them go to jail? I would, but it's not on the table anymore. If they would just tell the truth, well, that's acceptable to me. And so hopefully Congress will do that. Hopefully Congress will expose them for the criminals that they are.
Right.
And we may not see them locked up, well, unless they commit perjury or refuse to show.
Which is another possibility.
It is. But I would prefer, quite honestly, that they simply tell the truth.
Oh, yeah.
And then we have, of course, the Biden family pardons, of the Biden crime family. I think they should do the same thing with them. Pull them in front of Congress and do the exact same thing.
Yes, let's talk about Hunter Biden's laptop. Let's talk about Hunter. Let's talk about the entire family and about all the hidden money and all the deals and all the lobbying that's been going on through Biden as a sitting U.S. Senator or a vice president or a president for the last 50-some-odd years of them grifting and grafting and embezzling.
Yeah. I hate to see people get away with crimes, but unfortunately, due to the actions of Joe Biden, they've gotten away with crimes. But let's at least find out the truth about what really happened.
I mean,
Even if it cannot result in convictions and imprisonment, if we get on the record what occurred, well, it's the next best thing.
I mean, you got Pete Buttigieg here, who he is a transportation secretary, who was secretary all the way up until 3 or 4 days ago. I mean, he had $47 billion in money spent on building EV stations, and he only built 6 of them.
Yeah, well, he hadn't spent all that money yet. That's what was appropriated. It hadn't been spent yet, but that's what was appropriated, and it was a crazy amount of money. And yeah, I think it's actually, they've built like 15.
6.
But it was still nuts. I mean,
6 of them.
Are you sure it was 6? I heard it was 15.
Well, I heard it was 6 today. Well,
all right, well, whatever the number was.
15, sure.
It could be 1,500, Greg, and it would still be a crazy amount of money per station.
And then I guess the Department of Energy secretary, she had sent out $50 billion worth of grants and proposals to her donors in the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's been a lot of money.
$14 billion last week. She farmed out to 2 more donors just on her way out the door. I mean,
and unfortunately, I don't see a way to legally claw that back.
It's just, I mean, and I think the people, I mean, the swamp is a swamp. We get it. That's the reason why the swamp hated Trump coming in saying he was going to drain it so badly. But I mean, obviously, I mean, the more we expose the entire graft and the theft of the government workers all the way to the cabinet level, I mean, until people start seeing that and realizing it, they're just not going to fully, get it. I mean, basically, Biden and this entire administration has been stealing everybody blind. Totally.
Especially the taxpayers.
I mean, especially the taxpayers. And also all the non-taxpayers they've been bringing over the border. They've been robbing them blind too.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, all the new 8 million or 10 million non-fat taxpayers that came over. I mean, everybody got robbed. I mean, it's been a horrible, horrible administration. basically, you know, and he has the audacity to pardon his family, you know, and you wonder, and you don't really have to wonder really high on where all the corruption comes from. That starts at the top and just goes down from there.
Well, and of course, his stated reason was to protect his family and all the others from the malicious partisan prosecution of Trump, which of course is absurd, as is typical of the Democrats. They accuse others of doing what they themselves do. The political prosecution / persecution of political enemies, that was done by the Democrats and the Biden administration. It wasn't done by Trump.
Obviously, they have never met Pam Bondi, as you and I both have. In fact, I think we have a fixture of you and Pam Bondi here right now.
Well, I do know Pam Bondi quite well. Now, to say that we are friends,
is not going to do any kind of political prosecutions whatsoever.
No. I mean, to say Pam Bondi and I are friends would be an exaggeration. We're not friends, but I do know her. She knows me. We've talked many times on and off the air both. I think the world of her. I think she's brilliant. I think she's going to be an outstanding Attorney General. And I loved her in her congressional, or rather Senate confirmation hearings. She threw the nonsense right back at him. It was beautiful to watch.
It did a great job on how she handled everything. And so, I mean, it was, and so Biden obviously does not really understand fully that we are not in the same DOJ that he was in. He was in the one that is all about retribution and political payback and basically lawfare. And that's over. That's done. Period. I mean, this is a whole new day. I mean, and Trump said it's a whole new day. I mean, it really is. I mean, everything is being cleaned out. Like he did not do 8 years ago, whenever he was there. In 2017, he left a lot of people there. He realized his mistakes, I think, this time around. And he's cleaning out very, very quickly a lot of different departments.
Absent war or an economic collapse caused by the overspending of the last 6 years, I believe the second Trump administration will be far more successful than the first one.
I think it'll be
for the reasons you stated. He knows the job better. The 4 years he was out, and now he's coming back in, ready to hit the ground running. Obviously, he was disappointed when the election was stolen from him in 2020.
Right.
And it was stolen, by the way. Not for the reasons most people think, and not for the reasons he argued, unfortunately. It was other reasons. But I was disappointed he lost that election officially. But you know what? He's come back with far more experience, a much clearer agenda, and I think it's going to be a better second term than it was a first term.
Very good one. In fact, today he started, and we'll probably talk about this in the next segment. Our final segment is about the DEI and how he handled that. He just did a sweeping annihilation of it in every single part of the federal government. So we're going to go ahead and take a real quick break real quick, and we'll come back and we'll talk about the Trump's move on DEI. I was trying to make basically merit-based work, the entire initiative here for the federal government, and make sure that, they realize that they work for us. It's their money our money they're using. And so that's the way it needs to be. We'll be right back, and stay tuned.